Every morning, just as the sun began to rise and the streets were quiet, Emma put on her little sneakers and grabbed the leashes of her two small dogs, Bella and Max. The neighborhood was still sleepy, with soft lights glowing from the windows of the houses, and the air smelled fresh, carrying the faint scent of flowers from the nearby park. To anyone watching, Emma seemed like a cheerful little girl, full of energy and life. She smiled at the neighbors who waved at her, and she gently patted Bella and Max as they trotted happily by her side. But if anyone looked closely at Emma's eyes, they would notice something unusual. Behind her smile, there was a sadness that didn't belong to a child. Her small hands held the leashes tightly, almost as if she needed to hold on to something stable in a world that felt heavy for her. Every step she took on the familiar path felt routine, yet Emma seemed lost in thoughts that no one could see. Neighbors often wondered why Emma was always alone with her dogs. She didn't have older siblings who walked with her, and her parents rarely came outside in the morning. Some people whispered that she was just independent, but those who observed her more closely noticed something different. Emma sometimes stopped walking, her gaze fixed on the horizon, as if she was waiting for someone or something. And during those moments, Bella and Max would sit quietly beside her, their small heads tilted, sensing her mood. One morning, Liam, a young man who lived a few houses down, noticed Emma walking along the park's edge. She had her usual calm pace, but her eyes were watery. Liam was used to seeing children outside, but there was something about Emma that made him pause. He saw her bend down, whispering softly to Bella, and then Max licked her hand as if to comfort her. "Is she crying?" Liam thought to himself. His curiosity grew, but Emma didn't seem to notice anyone. She was lost in her own world, her secret world. Emma's daily walk had become more than just an activity, it was her escape. The streets were her safe place, and Bella and Max were her loyal companions who never judged her or asked questions. She whispered stories to them about her day, about her dreams, and sometimes about her worries, though she always kept the heaviest ones locked away. She walked farther than usual one morning, past the swings in the park where other children played, past the small pond where ducks floated lazily. No one saw her, no one followed her. Only the dogs were with her, their small paws stepping softly on the ground. People in the neighborhood began to notice small odd things. Emma sometimes returned from her walks with messy hair or her sneakers muddy, though there had been no rain. And there were times when she appeared tense, glancing over her shoulder, as if afraid that someone might be watching her too closely. The neighbors whispered to each other. "She's just a kid," said one. "Maybe she's hiding something," said another. But none of them could guess what it was. One particularly quiet morning, Emma took a different route than usual. She walked down a narrow path lined with tall trees, their branches swaying gently in the wind. The sunlight broke through the leaves in soft golden streaks, creating a magical glow around her. She paused, took a deep breath, and crouched down to hug Bella and Max. She whispered to them, "It's okay, don't worry, no one can see this." Her voice was barely audible, yet it carried a weight that no child should have to bear. From a distance, Olivia, another neighbor, watched Emma curiously. She had seen the girl many times before, always walking the dogs, always alone. But this time, Olivia noticed the way Emma's small shoulders shook slightly, and she felt a pang of concern. Olivia wanted to approach her, to ask if she was okay, but something stopped her. It was like the neighborhood instinctively knew that Emma's walks were private, sacred, a place where she could speak her mind without anyone prying. By the time Emma returned home, the sun was higher in the sky, and the streets were starting to fill with people heading to work or school. She tucked Bella and Max inside and ran a hand through her hair, trying to calm herself. No one would ever know what she went through on those walks. No one could imagine the weight she carried behind her small frame. And that was exactly the way Emma wanted it. Her secret, heavy as it was, belonged only to her and her dogs. But little did she know, someone was beginning to notice the signs, someone who might eventually uncover the truth she tried so hard to hide. The neighbors had already started talking, whispers traveling quietly down the street. Questions lingered in the air. Why does Emma always walk alone? Why does she sometimes seem so sad? And most importantly, what is she hiding? The secret was hidden, but the tension was building. Each morning, each walk, each whisper to Bella and Max was a small puzzle piece, waiting for the day it would all come together. And the day was coming sooner than anyone could imagine. Every day, Emma's walks became more than just a morning routine. They were her private time, a world she could control. After leaving her house with Bella and Max, she followed the same streets at first, waving politely at neighbors who smiled and nodded at her. But then she would veer off, down the smaller paths in the park that not many people noticed. These paths were lined with tall trees, their leaves whispering in the gentle wind, and soft sunlight filtering through in little golden patches. It was during these walks that Emma felt safest. Bella and Max walked close to her, sometimes brushing against her legs, other times sniffing curiously at the ground. Emma often spoke to them quietly, as if her words could only be heard by them. "I'll take care of everything," she would whisper. "Don't worry, I promise." Her voice was soft, almost fragile, but the dogs seemed to understand. They would look up at her with their big brown eyes, wagging their tails gently, offering comfort in a way that no one else could. Liam, the neighbor who had noticed Emma before, began seeing her more often now. He didn't follow her, he wasn't that kind of person, but he couldn't help noticing little things that didn't make sense. Sometimes she carried a small, worn-out backpack that looked too heavy for a child her age. Other times, her shoes were muddy, even though there hadn't been rain. And every so often, her eyes would glisten as if she had been crying, though no one saw her shed a tear. One particular morning, Mason, a boy from a nearby street, spotted Emma sitting on a low park bench, her dogs lying quietly at her feet. She was hunched over, staring at something inside her backpack. Mason thought about approaching her, but something told him not to. Emma seemed fragile, like the wrong words might break her. So he stayed hidden behind a tree, watching silently. For a moment, Emma pulled out a small photograph from the backpack. She held it close, her fingers tracing the faces in the picture. She whispered something softly, a promise to someone far away. As she walked again, Mason noticed that Emma sometimes stopped to look around, almost nervously. She seemed worried that someone might see her, or that someone might discover the secret she was keeping. But what was the secret? Mason couldn't tell. All he knew was that there was something about Emma that made him want to help, even if he didn't know how. Emma's walks weren't always calm. Some days, she seemed anxious, her pace faster, her steps quick and light. Bella and Max would stay close, sensing her unease. On one such day, she took a path that led closer to an old, abandoned playground. The swings creaked in the wind, and the rusty slide glimmered under the sun. Emma knelt down, talking to her dogs again. "I can't let anyone know," she said quietly. "It's our secret. Just us." She buried her face in her hands, and for a few moments, the world seemed to disappear, leaving only her and the dogs. Even Olivia, the neighbor who had once watched her quietly, began to notice the small patterns in Emma's behavior. Sometimes Emma would sit alone on the bench for a long time, lost in thought, and then suddenly stand up, as if remembering something urgent. She rarely spoke to other children, and when she did, her words were short, almost rehearsed. There was a loneliness about her, a quiet strength that made people wonder what she had gone through. It wasn't just the walks that kept Emma busy. When she returned home, she would spend hours writing in a small notebook she kept hidden under her bed. She didn't write stories or notes about school. These were personal thoughts, letters to someone who wasn't there. She wrote about hope, about fear, and sometimes about sorrow. Occasionally, a tear would fall on the paper, smudging the words, but she never showed anyone. It was her way of carrying the feelings she couldn't share out loud. One day, while Emma was walking near the small pond in the park, a stranger walked past, noticing her alone with the dogs. He smiled, thinking she was just a child enjoying her pets. But when he looked closer, he noticed her small hands trembling slightly as she held the leashes. He couldn't see what was written in her eyes, the sadness, the worry, but he felt a strange pull, a feeling that this little girl was carrying something much bigger than her age should allow. Emma continued to whisper to her dogs, "We'll get through this, just us." And though no one else knew, these whispers were her strength. Each morning walk was her escape, her therapy, and her shield from the world. But with every day, the signs of her secret were becoming harder to hide. Liam had begun to wonder more seriously, Mason felt a growing concern, and even Olivia's curiosity was hard to ignore. And so, the mystery of Emma grew. Every neighbor who watched her silently began to sense that there was more than just a cheerful little girl walking her dogs. There was a story hidden behind those soft eyes, a story that could break hearts or inspire them. The secret was still locked inside Emma, but the pieces were slowly coming together, teasing the neighborhood and the viewers of this story with the promise that soon, everything would be revealed. Emma's walks had become a quiet routine, a rhythm she could rely on, but the peaceful mornings were about to change. Mason, a boy from a nearby street, had begun to notice her more often. Unlike Liam, who only observed occasionally, Mason felt a strange connection to Emma's quiet sadness. He didn't know why, but seeing her alone every morning whispering to her dogs, tugged at something inside him. One morning, Mason was leaving his house with his skateboard when he spotted Emma walking along her usual path. She was crouched near the old playground, talking softly to Bella and Max. The sun had just risen, casting long shadows across the park, and the leaves swayed gently in the breeze. Mason froze for a moment, unsure if he should approach. There was something fragile about Emma, something that made him hesitant. But curiosity and concern overcame him. He walked closer, keeping a safe distance, careful not to startle her. Emma noticed him out of the corner of her eye but didn't stop. She tugged the leashes gently, whispering, "Just a little farther. Stay calm." Mason watched quietly. He noticed the way her small hands gripped the leashes tightly, the faint quiver in her shoulders. There was more than just shyness in her behavior. There was worry, fear, and maybe even pain. For weeks, Mason observed Emma secretly, learning her patterns. He noticed that she always took the same hidden paths in the park, sometimes stopping at places that looked ordinary but seemed special to her. She would crouch by a tree, whispering words to her dogs as if they were her only confidants. And when she walked past other children, she kept her head down, avoiding eye contact. Mason started to realize that Emma's daily walks were more than a pastime. They were her sanctuary, a safe world where she could carry the weight she could not share with anyone else. One morning, as the air smelled crisp and fresh, Mason saw Emma sitting by the small pond, her backpack beside her. She was holding a small notebook in her hands and flipping through pages gently. Mason didn't know what was written there, but he sensed the pages held her heart, the thoughts she couldn't speak aloud. He took a careful step closer, and suddenly, a branch snapped under his foot. Emma's head shot up and her wide eyes met his. For a moment, Mason thought she might run, but instead, she froze. Bella and Max stayed close, growling softly as if warning him to stay back. Emma's lips trembled as she whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Her voice was barely audible, but Mason understood the meaning. She trusted no one, not yet. He stepped back immediately, raising his hands slightly to show he meant no harm. Mason walked away slowly that day, but he couldn't stop thinking about Emma. Who was she hiding from? Why did she speak only to her dogs? And why did it feel like she was carrying a secret far bigger than herself? Every time he saw her after that, he noticed subtle things that made his concern grow. Sometimes her eyes were red as if she had been crying in secret. Sometimes she carried something small, like a photo or a note, that she hid quickly whenever someone walked by. Emma, meanwhile, continued her routine, unaware that Mason had begun to pay attention. She whispered to Bella and Max every morning, her voice filled with both hope and sorrow. "I have to be strong," she would say. "No one can know. Only you understand." And the dogs would nuzzle her gently, their soft warmth a small comfort in a world that seemed too big for a little girl to carry alone. On one rainy morning, Emma's steps slowed. Her sneakers squelched in the puddles, and Bella and Max shivered slightly beside her. Mason, who had been nearby, noticed immediately. He saw the hesitation in her movement, the subtle sadness that had become a part of her morning routine. She stopped near a tree, crouching down, and pulled something from her backpack. It was a small photograph, worn at the edges, showing two adults smiling. Emma pressed it to her chest, whispering, "I miss you. I wish you were here." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, Mason felt a lump in his throat. He realized then that Emma's secret was not something simple. It was heavy, emotional, and deeply personal. And though she had trusted no one with it yet, Mason felt that he might be the first to see behind the mask, to understand the little girl who walked her dogs every morning with sadness hidden in her eyes. From that day on, Mason made a silent promise. He wouldn't pry, but he would watch over her. He would make sure she was safe even if she didn't know it. And as Emma continued her walks, whispering to Bella and Max, the tension in the neighborhood grew. People started noticing little by little that Emma was different. And while the world didn't yet know her secret, one day, everything would come to light. The mornings in the neighborhood had begun to feel different. People who had once thought Emma was just a cheerful little girl now noticed something unusual. She always walked her dogs, Bella and Max, with a quiet determination, but there was a tension in her movements that made neighbors glance twice. Mason had started following her from a distance, careful not to intrude, but every day he saw new hints of the secret she carried. Emma had found a few new paths in the park, ones lined with tall trees whose branches swayed gently in the wind. These were quieter paths, away from other children and families. She liked the feeling of being hidden, of being alone with her thoughts and her dogs. On one particular morning, she stopped near a small, overgrown area with wildflowers. She crouched down and opened her backpack, pulling out a small notebook. Her hands shook slightly as she flipped through the pages. Each page was filled with neat handwriting, letters she had never sent, thoughts she had never shared, and feelings too heavy for a child her age to bear. Bella and Max stayed close, their small bodies pressed against her legs. Emma whispered to them softly, "I have to be brave. I can't let anyone see." Her voice was fragile, yet determined. Mason, hidden behind a tree a few meters away, watched quietly. He noticed the way she clutched the notebook and the photograph tucked inside it. Something was clearly wrong, and Mason could feel that Emma was holding back something painful, something that weighed on her small shoulders every day. Even the neighbors who didn't pay close attention started noticing small oddities. Olivia saw Emma walk past her house one day, her shoes muddy and her backpack looking heavier than normal. Liam noticed that Emma sometimes seemed tense, as if she expected something bad to happen. Small signs appeared everywhere, subtle enough that most people could ignore them, but together, they painted a picture of a child carrying a burden too heavy for her age. One rainy morning, Emma took her dogs along the narrow paths as usual. The wind blew through the trees, shaking leaves down onto the muddy ground. She stopped at a familiar spot near the old pond. She crouched down, brushing wet hair from her face, and whispered to her dogs, "We can't let anyone know, not yet." Bella and Max pressed close, their warmth and loyalty offering her the comfort she could not find anywhere else. Mason noticed something unusual that day. Emma pulled out a small, folded piece of paper from her backpack. She opened it and read silently, her lips moving slightly. Mason couldn't see what was written, but he could feel the weight of her secret in the way she held herself, in the trembling of her small hands. It was clear that whatever was written on that paper was important, something she wanted to hide at all costs. Later, when Emma returned home, she placed the notebook and paper carefully under her bed. She went inside as if nothing had happened, smiling politely at neighbors who waved, but her eyes betrayed her. She had moments of relief when she was alone with Bella and Max, but the tension never fully left her. Each day, her secret seemed heavier, and the worry in her small frame became more noticeable. That evening, Olivia, who had grown curious, watched from her window. She noticed Emma sitting at her desk, flipping through the notebook under the soft light of her room. The little girl looked fragile, lost in her thoughts, yet she exuded a quiet strength. Olivia wondered why Emma seemed so different from other children, why she always whispered to her dogs instead of talking to anyone else. The questions built a quiet tension that left Olivia restless long after she stopped watching. Even Mason began to understand that Emma's morning walks were a ritual, a private world where she could deal with the emotions that no one else could see. He could feel that there was more than loneliness. There was worry, fear, and perhaps even responsibility. Each small action, holding the notebook close, whispering to her dogs, avoiding other children, was a clue that her secret was serious, far more serious than anyone guessed. Emma's story, hidden from the world, was slowly unfolding through her actions. Bella and Max were her constant companions, understanding her pain without judgment. The notebook, the photograph, the small piece of paper, these were pieces of her life that she carried alone. But the world around her was starting to notice. Questions lingered in the air. What was in the notebook? Why did Emma whisper to her dogs? What was she trying to hide so desperately? The tension in the neighborhood grew, and with it, the curiosity of Mason, Olivia, and even Liam. Each clue Emma left behind was like a breadcrumb trail leading to the heart of her secret. And while the little girl continued to walk every morning, holding Bella and Max close, the sense that something important was about to be revealed became stronger. Every whispered word, every glance, every hidden tear built suspense. The story was waiting to explode, and viewers watching this tale couldn't help but lean forward, wondering what Emma was hiding and when the truth would finally come out. The mornings were quieter than ever, but the tension in Emma's small world was growing. Each day, her walks with Bella and Max became heavier, not in distance, but in emotion. Emma moved more slowly now, her eyes scanning the empty streets and park paths, as if she feared someone might see what she was hiding. Mason had noticed this change. He had begun to watch more carefully, giving her space but always staying nearby, feeling that one day he might be the first to understand her secret. That morning, the sun was just rising, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. Emma pulled on her jacket, grabbed the leashes, and set off as usual. Bella and Max barked happily, their small tails wagging, but Emma's smile was faint. She walked past the park swings and over the little bridge by the pond, taking the long, hidden path that led to her favorite spot, a secluded corner under the tall oak trees. She crouched down there, pulling out the small notebook she always carried. Her hands trembled as she flipped the pages, stopping at a note she had written days ago. The words were simple, but heavy with emotion. I wish someone could help. I want to be strong, but it's so hard. Bella nudged her hand gently, sensing her sadness. Max leaned against her, pressing close. Emma whispered softly, I know, we'll get through this together. Her voice shook, but there was determination behind it, a quiet strength that only those who truly observed her could see. Mason, hidden behind a bush a few meters away, could see everything. He noticed the small photograph she kept pressed to her chest and the trembling of her hands as she held it. Something about the sight made his chest tighten. He realized this was no ordinary child, and no ordinary secret. Emma was carrying a burden that she couldn't share, a weight that belonged entirely to her small shoulders. As she walked back home, Emma noticed a few neighbors watching her from afar. She felt a flicker of worry, her pace quickening slightly. But she didn't stop. She couldn't afford to stop. Her secret needed to remain hidden for now. Yet she left more clues than she realized. The notebook, the photograph, her small hesitations and whispered words, all pointed to something serious that she was protecting fiercely. Back home, Emma placed her notebook and photograph carefully under her bed. She tried to act normal as she greeted her dogs, speaking softly, stroking their fur. We're okay, it's just us, she said. Her words were meant to reassure herself as much as Bella and Max. But the tension she carried didn't vanish. It lingered, a quiet storm inside her that no one else could see. Mason, who had been observing the whole scene, couldn't ignore the signs any longer. He had watched Emma for weeks, trying to piece together what she was hiding. The small notebook, the photograph, the secret paths in the park, and the whispered words. It all told a story he couldn't fully understand yet, but he knew it was serious. Mason felt a deep urge to help her, even though he didn't know how. He wanted to be someone she could trust, someone who could stand by her without judgment. The neighborhood had begun to notice Emma more. Olivia whispered to Liam about the little girl's mysterious walks. Have you seen her lately? Something feels different, she said. Liam nodded slowly. Yeah, there's something she's hiding. I can feel it. The tension was no longer just around Emma. It was spreading among the people who cared enough to notice. Everyone felt that a secret existed, but no one could yet guess the truth. One afternoon, Emma found herself sitting under the oak trees again, Bella and Max at her side. She opened the notebook and read a page aloud softly, her voice trembling. I just want someone to understand, someone to care, someone to notice me without asking too many questions. The dogs pressed close, offering the silent comfort she needed. And as she whispered, Mason watched from a distance, realizing that the little girl he had been observing was far more courageous than he had ever imagined. That day, the tension reached a new level. Emma's secret was no longer just hers. It had begun to touch the lives of others. Mason felt the first stirrings of determination. He had to be careful, but he couldn't ignore the signs any longer. The way Emma carried her sorrow, the way she confided only in her dogs, and the small notes she kept hidden, all pointed to a story that needed to be understood and, eventually, shared. And so, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the park paths, Emma walked back home, clutching Bella and Max tightly. Her secret still remained, heavy and unspoken, but the pieces were beginning to align. Mason knew that soon, someone would have to step in, and the neighborhood, though unaware of the full story, would witness the courage of a little girl whose heart had already endured so much. The next morning, the air was crisp and the streets quiet, just like every other day. Emma put on her little jacket, grabbed the leashes of Bella and Max, and stepped outside. But today felt different. There was a subtle tension in her steps, a weight she couldn't shake. Even the dogs seemed to sense it, walking closer to her side than usual, their small paws tapping softly on the pavement. Mason had been waiting quietly, knowing that today might be the day something important would happen. He didn't know what Emma's secret was, but he felt that the time had come for the truth to reveal itself. He stayed a respectful distance behind her, observing silently. Emma walked past the familiar park, past the swings, and over the little bridge by the pond. She slowed down when she reached her favorite spot under the tall oak trees. There, Emma knelt down and opened her notebook. Her small hands shook as she held the pages carefully, almost reverently. Bella and Max pressed against her legs, offering their comfort. Mason could see tears glistening in her eyes, but she didn't try to hide them this time. She whispered softly to the dogs, "It's time. I can't do this alone anymore." Mason stepped closer cautiously, and Emma finally looked up. She saw him and, for the first time, didn't pull back. There was a trust in her eyes, a silent plea for understanding. "I have to tell someone," she whispered. "I can't hide it anymore." Emma took a deep breath and opened her backpack. Mason watched as she pulled out the photograph she always carried. A picture of her parents, smiling warmly, but with tears drawn over their faces in pencil. Emma's voice trembled as she spoke. "My parents, they're sick. Very sick. They can't take care of themselves, and sometimes, I'm all they have. I take care of them when I can. I walk the dogs to clear my mind, to be strong for them. But no one knows, no one understands." Mason felt a lump form in his throat. He had sensed her secret was serious, but this was heavier than he had imagined. The little girl walking her dogs every morning, whispering to them, hiding her notebook, and carrying herself with such strength, all this time, she had been carrying the burden of her parents' illness alone. Emma's tears fell freely now. Bella licked her cheek, and Max pressed his head against her hand. "I try to be brave," she whispered. "I try, but sometimes it's too much." Mason knelt down beside her gently. "You're not alone," he said softly. "I can help. We can help." Emma looked at him with wide, hopeful eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of relief, like a heavy cloud lifting from her small shoulders. Mason reached out, offering comfort without judgment. The dogs wagged their tails happily, sensing the change. Emma's secret, once locked away, was now shared with someone who cared. Word of Emma's situation slowly reached the neighbors. Olivia and Liam, who had noticed her mysterious walks, offered small acts of kindness. A warm smile, a helping hand, a word of encouragement. The neighborhood began to feel connected, as if the little girl walking her dogs every morning had reminded them of the importance of noticing and caring for others. Emma's walks didn't stop. She still took Bella and Max along every morning, but now there was a new feeling in her steps, hope. She shared her worries more openly with Mason, and together they found ways to manage her responsibilities. The dogs remained her loyal companions, but now she also had the support of someone who truly understood. The secret that once weighed so heavily on her heart became a bridge, connecting her with the people around her. Her strength inspired others to notice the quiet struggles in their own neighborhoods, to reach out, and to offer care without waiting to be asked. And for Emma, the world felt a little less heavy, her mornings a little brighter, and her heart a little lighter. She whispered to Bella and Max one last time that morning, smiling through her tears, "We're going to be okay, all of us." The dogs nuzzled her, as if agreeing. Mason watched quietly, knowing that he had witnessed something extraordinary, a little girl who had faced a storm all on her own and had found the courage to let others in. And that morning, under the oak trees, the secret was finally out. But instead of fear, it brought understanding. Instead of sadness, it brought hope. Emma had taught everyone around her a simple but powerful lesson, that even in the heaviest moments, kindness, care, and trust could heal the deepest wounds.